Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us for our session here. So our session is titled Through the Lens of Warhol, Museum and Library Multi-Platform Partnership at Stanford University. My name is Tiffany Ciccato, and I'm with the Cantor Arts Center. Before we dive into our discussion, just some quick background for those of you who aren't familiar with the Cantor Arts Center. So it actually predates the establishment of the university. We just celebrated our 125th anniversary. Our collection is an encyclopedic collection. We have about 42,000 objects, half of which are primarily works on paper. We have about 60,000 square feet of exhibition space, and through the course of our year, we're usually doing up to 30 special exhibitions and rotations. Our staff size is just below 50, making us one of the smaller size staffs for as far as university museums go. And for this audience, it may be of particular interest to note that we have no designated IT support on site. So we're part of the larger university IT system, and as you can imagine, with that kind of arrangement, as far as planning, developing, maintaining any kind of digital technology-related initiative can be interesting. So today, in the next 30 minutes, you'll be learning about a major gift that the Cantor received a few years ago from the Andy Warhol Foundation. And we hope that you'll gain some good to knows if you're thinking about partnering with another institution or another organization. In our case, we are worked obviously with the Warhol Foundation as well as the deep network of Stanford libraries. Another thing that, you know, if your organization is considering what goes into a major digitization project, hopefully you'll get some good insights from our presentation. And we're very lucky to have 3 key contributors to this project here who'll be speaking. So Clarissa Morales, Peg Brady, and Diane Weinthal. I also want to recognize a couple of other folks who are very instrumental but who unfortunately couldn't join us today. Amy Di Pasquale, she was our project archivist on the Warhol gift. Arcadia Falcone and Hannah Frost, who are with Stanford Libraries. So with that, I'll hand the mic over to Peg.
Thank you, Tiffany. The Andy Warhol Photography Archive was an amazing gift for the Cantor. So exactly what was that gift? In this slide, you can see a breakdown of the components. The gift consists of all of Andy Warhol's black and white 35mm photographs from 1976 to 1987. To quote the curators of our exhibition, wherever he went, whether to discotheques, dinner parties, flea markets, or wrestling matches, Warhol brought his 35mm camera with him. Friends, boyfriends, and business associates, socialites, celebrities, and passerbys all captured his attention, at least for the moment it took him to snap the shutter. This is what the 130,000 plus exposures in the Stanford contact sheets are. At the time of the gift to the Cantor in 2014, only a very small amount of this material had actually been shared with the public. So this slide shows you, for those of you that may not actually know what 35mm contact sheets are, this is a contact sheet. The gift, as we noted in the other slide, consists of both the contact sheets and the actual negatives. We were given the ownership of the physical works. The Andy Warhol Foundation retains all copyright for publication and reproduction rights. The gift was definitely an opportunity for the Cantor, and it was an opportunity to present this material to the public for the first time. It provided the resources to establish both the Cantor and Stanford as a site for in-depth study of this time period of Warhol's creative expression. It also served as the catalyst to redesign the museum's website and create a more robust online presence for the museum collections. This slide details the expectations of the agreement between the Warhol Foundation and the museum at the time of the gift. The agreement promised these deliverables. A 3-year time frame was agreed on by both parties, a time frame that as we began to actually get into the deliverables was extended by an additional year as we realized the full scope of what this wonderful gift required. Before the deliverables could even be worked on, there was a whole nother workflow. The entire gift had to be cataloged and assigned accession numbers. So to accomplish this, a full-time 3-year term position was created for an archivist, this position being filled by hiring Amy DePasquale in 2015, which is several months after the initial gift. In October of 2017, with digital image files needing to be linked to the database and planning for the exhibition beginning, a part-time term position of an assistant was added to the project, and Diane Weinthal was hired to fill that position. The next slide is a shout out to Amy DePasquale, who was the Warhol archivist. Her deep knowledge of all things Warhol allowed her to catalog the entire collection and also provided expert guidance to the curators who selected the images that became the exhibition. Amy knows more about Warhol, I think, than Warhol did. Partnering with the libraries, why? The library's online catalog SearchWorks is a state-of-the-art online resource with international reach. They have a large tech-savvy staff that supports this catalog. The site also includes sophisticated analytics that would allow Cantor to track who is accessing and using the collection worldwide. We could also partner with the libraries while still working on a parallel presentation of material on our own website. The next slide, this gives you sort of a visual breakdown of the timeline of the project, and you'll see from it that many of the phases overlapped in really significant ways. The period of time, I would say 2016 to 2018, was obviously pretty intense. And we are even now still rehousing the actual negatives themselves. So one other thing to note with this timeline is that in 2016, we were also dealing with a lot of staff changeover. For about 1.5 years at that time, the Cantor was without a director. It took until 2017 for a collection department manager, myself, to be named to oversee the project, and for a director of collections, exhibitions, and conservation to be hired. This lack of permanent staff in key positions for the first half of the project meant that the archivist, which was a term position, was for quite a bit of time making decisions on her own without full knowledge of the entire institution's investment in the project.
Can you guys hear me okay? Okay. So thank you, Peg. Within that project timeline that we just took a look at, we had to develop parallel workflows to ensure that Warhol materials, records, and content would ultimately be discoverable on both platforms, the Cantors and the libraries, and serve each aspect of the Warhol gift. So that gift, the Warhol collection, included, as Peg mentioned, the negative exposures, which required individual frame digitization, so we see with Jane Fonda on the left here. And then the contact sheets from which those negative frames were selected, which needed page-by-page digitization that we see in the center. And then the digitized files. These files enabled the creation of new study prints, like those that we see on the right. This is a unique opportunity for the Cantor for exhibition and research, but it was apparent that these files really needed a platform for digital discovery as well. So the Cantor provides physical exhibition space, museum storage, and a digital collection site experience for the Warhol collection. The library, on the other hand, has a digital repository infrastructure compatible with the IIIF viewing environment. And this viewing experience allows for deep zoom functionality that is crucial for seeing a contact sheet and allows for greater search and discovery of the Warhol material. So our takeaway here is the process to distinguish between the types of material in a gift or a collection, discuss their requirements, and then determine what each partner institution can offer. On top of all of that, we also had a lot of metadata. So metadata was important for effectively collaborating on the Warhol collection as we were migrating both the records and the aura of Warhol between museum and library environments. So how did we manage this timeline with all of these pieces in both places? Initial records were created in the Embark database software at the Cantor. A batch master record was duplicated for the 3,600 contact sheets, and another master for the same number of rolls of negatives. The information changed over time to encompass relevant data like exhibition history, curatorial notes, cataloging, subject terms, and all the rest. Each contact sheet came with a Warhol Foundation number. It was given a temporary acquisition number, and then a final Cantor ID number, all while keeping an original Warhol job number which matched or sometimes mismatched between the contact sheets and their corresponding negatives. This may sound confusing because it was, but a consistent database structure helped track all of these changes and all of the record identifiers. Records including all of these identifiers were exported as a CSV file, input to Excel, and crosswalk to mods for the library with the help of lots of manual entry and filtered changes to conform to a specific metadata template. This process definitely could not have happened without the work of the Digital Library Systems team and Arcadia Falcone, the metadata coordinator at the library. This was going on concurrently, as Peg mentioned, with digitization, website infrastructure updates, and the Cantor's existing workflows for exhibition and publication production. So a takeaway from this process is the importance of finding out what your partner institution's needs are, especially when it comes to files and standards. We learned that the library had a 6-month timeline for digital asset ingestion to its repository, and that became a factor in our timeline to launch the physical and online exhibition simultaneously. So we highly recommend having the conversation about standardized formats, for example, things like date encoding, before processing even begins, and consider how to communicate your partnership to your audience, so make those roles transparent. For example, on the Cantor's collection display online, visitors are informed that Stanford Library has a high-res zoom view for contact sheets and may be the better platform for detailed image analysis, whereas the Cantor's site can display individual negative frames, which we'll get to take a look at in a moment. So this collaboration was concerned with Warhol image and information interoperability, meaning that we needed to have the collection's record data work for multiple kinds of institutions and ultimately support multiple kinds of audiences and researchers. The museum and library have different frameworks for record management, different database systems, different standards and encodings, and as we said, different levels of IT support. This made work regarding technical specifications an extra challenge and also involved some external vendors. So some important tech specs for this collection. The first one being quality. As Peg had mentioned, this is Warhol 35mm photography, the majority of which had never been seen before. This felt pretty high stakes. We needed a fast turnaround to meet our deadline, but also required high resolution for both contact sheets and individual negative exposures. The Cantor does not have photography or digitization facilities on site, so this had to be contracted out after taking some significant time to find the right external vendor for the job. After digitizing, we also discovered that conservation work was required on some 35mm color slides. Reworking images to meet that high quality standard was a pressure on our timeline. Another important aspect was rights. So once we had these beautiful, huge, high-resolution files, we had to be careful with their distribution. The Cantor, the library, and the Warhol Foundation had to continually define our terms for exhibiting these images. For example, negative frames viewable on the Cantor's collection site all include a copyright watermark statement, which required a batch reprocessing of JPEG derivatives. And because there is no standard for what a thumbnail is, we had to negotiate pixel dimensions to balance presentation for an adequate viewing experience while also safeguarding the Warhol Foundation copyright requirements. And a final specification that we felt was important to share was size. So the size of our digital assets also played an unexpected factor. The Cantor's existing server and database were not initially set up for batch processing nor handling the 12 terabytes of new information created from the digitization process. We also had to consult with the library staff, including contracting another member of the digital library team, on how to safely ensure the transfer of digital files into our database with no corruption, and then how to share it with the library. So the takeaway here on these tech specs are to discuss upfront, if not understand outright, the evolving technical requirements of each component of a project. In our case, it involved the quality of digitization, the storage issues of file size, and the display parameters for intellectual property among stakeholders. Ample time with a lot of leeway to determine and implement these specs is necessary on a project timeline. Also want to emphasize the importance of collaboration between all of the participating institutions.
Thanks, Diane. So talking about the project outcomes and some closing takeaways. So we had many concrete outcomes that fulfilled and exceeded the requirements of the gift, and which include, multi-platform web presence, the exhibition, the publication, our digital interactive that was produced for the exhibition. But in addition, we also had several unintended outcomes that happened because of the gift, and this was an improved museum collection website, a stronger relationship with our university libraries, additional gifts that have since been awarded to the museum. For example, in the past year, we were gifted the Capital Group Foundation gift of over 1,000 photographs with bodies of work by Ansel Adams, Edward Weston, Wright Morris, John Gutman, Gordon Parks, Helen Levitt, and Edward Curtis. It also paved the way for 2 new curatorial positions to be established at the museum, including a curator of photography and new media and a fellow in photography as well. And then, gifts keep on giving often. So we are continuing to have ongoing conversations with faculty and other institution-wide constituents on how to maximize this archive's reach to our faculty, researchers, and of course our students at Stanford University. So this is an example of our Cantor website, digging into the photography archive there, where you can enter in through and view the contact sheets or the negatives, and there's also a link to the library's page, as Diane mentioned before, for that IIIF experience or to the spotlight. So here's just a quick video of how you enter in from our website and go to our collections page. As they said, you can choose. The main reason we decided to also include the collection on our collections page is that we have the capabilities to show the individual frames from the negatives, which, because of security concerns from the foundation on the library's site, they weren't able to do. So as you can see here, you could dig in. You can see these very cute dogs Andy Warhol photographed at one time, and on the same sheet, a young Lou Reed as well. So that was a really interesting capability that we were able to realize on our museum website. And then moving to the library's pages, so there were 2 parts: our SearchWorks catalog, which you can see a dashboard here. And then next there was our Spotlight exhibit that was on the Stanford page that was helped by one of the curators for the exhibition, Peggy Phelan, and Amy DePasquale, who came up with a bit more of a palatable entry point into that archive. And then just in the next slide, you'll see kind of how to use that page or dig into it from the SearchWorks site. So you can see here that, starting with the contact sheet, which is very hard to see in just the image, is using their zoom capabilities, is that you're able to really dig deep into some of this imagery. You see a young Madonna here off of her concert with Keith Haring and a young Jean-Michel Basquiat. So you can really investigate some of these contact sheets in a way that you're not able to on our museum site. So really highlighting this technology as well as all of the cataloging information that our archivists were able to produce. And then moving forward, just some analytics or data that we were able to gather in the past year from our library sites. Again, a key focus of digitizing this and putting it out there on our library sites was the international reach that it had. And as you can see in the bottom right corner, it shows how many countries that individuals have been able to access this archive from. And you could see here too that a big thing for us was the new users that was brought to the site. Almost 78% of people who have looked into the site were brand new users. And as well, what we found important was the amount of time people were spending on the page, so over 4 minutes, which we thought was pretty impressive, actually. And then, as I mentioned, our exhibition and publication that were produced, one of the complications too with this was that everything was timed together. So within this 3 and then extended to 4-year deadline was we needed an exhibition produced, a publication, and all of our online research databases needed to go live basically the same time. So no pressure. So we, as you can see in the photo on the right, this is an installation shot from our exhibition. It's in a 4,200 square foot exhibition space at the Cantor Museum. We only use 49 of the over 3,600 contact sheets physically in the space. And that's because for user visitorship, it's really difficult to see all of that information at once. So with our curators, they developed this type of stem cell context for the works, showing how from the contact sheet was a larger photograph was produced, to a stitched photograph, to a full-fledged silk screen from that image that had been taken. And then an image of the publication on the left. And in there you could see we produced this digital interactive. And with the interactive, if you want, we made this attract video to attract visitors to use it. But what was really important was the functionality of this and being able to zoom, mimicking the library's technology as well, but the ability to rotate because of the different orientations in the screen, as well as providing that cataloging information at the bottom. And this, we only ended up using about 105 of our contact sheets. Again, money, time was an issue, but also usability, or I think adding all of them into this type of wouldn't have done anything for our users. So, and this was created with not necessarily to be in direct or to always be under the context of the exhibition, so we could potentially bring this out in the future and reuse it. And then just moving to kind of our closing takeaways. So GIFs are great, they're awesome, and they really expand the physical holdings of a museum's collection, and with thoughtful digital partnerships, GIFs can really grow both the museum's presence online, lead to professional growth and technical growth for your staff, and hopefully inspire future projects that expand your presence digitally. But as you may have gathered, this was not a project that the staff really knew what the full ramifications were going into it. And with the staff turnover, negotiations for this agreement was definitely done at an executive level, as I would say, director to director, from university libraries to the Cantor to the Andy Warhol Foundation. So when the museum staff finally learned about the full requirements, it definitely was a mad scramble and really real questions of where and how do we even get started, and how are we going to complete everything in time. Obviously a key takeaway for us is if we were to do it all over again, figure out who the key players are early on as soon as the agreement is made, even if their respective scope of work or activity may not begin for several years. And this is really to get them to the table to talk about the promised requirements and flesh out the timeline, acknowledging that it will keep, it will keep moving. Initially we thought of this as very much a collection-centric project, but it ended up expanding across the entire institution and coming up in different formats. So really, obviously involve staff and partners early, start talking about it as soon as it gets going. And I wouldn't say all of our missteps or hiccups could have been avoided with more advanced planning, but we would have at least felt more prepared and would have increased the buy-in institutionally, I think. And again, this was a brand new endeavor for the Cantor. So one of the most meaningful takeaways is the experience itself. And the museum may not have all the resources available at its fingertips or in-house, but we now know where to get started. And I think that was really big for us, and the processes that we need to have in place to execute a partnership and project like this in the future. And of course, time. The more time, the better. Unfortunately, time is not often a luxury that we museum people get ever. So I wanted to end with this quote from Warhol himself. They always say time changes things, but you have to change them yourself. So thank you, and if you have any questions, let us know. So I would say yes, but not formally. So that is something that we are hoping to do, and with this new photography collection that we've just received, we've also have an archive of Richard Diebenkorn's sketchbooks that we've done, and there are many areas that we're now trying to strategize on how to get that onto the libraries, on the library sites, because we see how that functionality and how it drives traffic to our museum site as well.
Can I follow up with, are you seeing more student engagement with this material from the library site?
I wouldn't say necessarily yet, but we're hoping that with additional archives like this that we have, that will promote more student engagement with our museum and our collections. It's definitely been something that the faculty has been using quite often. So I guess in that way, it's expanded that reach, but not yet, I guess, fully.
Any other questions or comments? How many of you are with the University Museum or with the library? Our people.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.